Well, I'm Chris Beachum with this Emmys 2020 Contenders panel. We've got David Rubin representing Little Fires Everywhere and Big Little Lies, Carmen Cuba, Stranger Things, Victoria Thomas, The Morning Show, and Terri Taylor, The Loudest Voice. Let's start with Terri on this first question. I always love asking these on panels. Tell me a casting director from all time, film or television, that you just really admire, somebody that you long to be like.
Wow, I'm sitting amongst three of them right now. I actually worked for David Rubin very early in my career. It was my second job in casting. I was his casting assistant. And Debbie Zane was his associate. So I would add Debbie Zane to this amazing group of casting directors. I think I've learned from everyone. Carmen and I grew up together. That's how I feel anyway. Carmen, we were assistants together, associates together. We shared a hallway together. I love the work they do. I feel inspired by them. Lucky to know them, lucky to call them my friends too.
I feel like we really are a really great community. So, you know, there are so many people I look up to. Ellen Lewis, anytime I see her work, I'm always slightly jealous and so super impressed, and just sort of hope that one day I can be at that level. Nina Gold, all of her work, Lorraine Mayfield, the work she does with David Fincher, to me is super impressive. And also my former, I only worked for one person, and that was Margie Simpkin, and she's an icon to me, and I'm always impressed by her and have learned so much from all of them.
I think we have to get a shout out to the Lynn Stallmasters and Marion Doherty's, Mike Fenton, those people that preceded us and were the early casting directors. I think we have to give a shout out to them, and if we could.
I agree.
As prolific and as good as they were, I think they're amazing casting directors.
Now, David is on the casting branch for the Motion Picture Academy and the current president, so don't get any trouble here not naming non-Academy members.
It's a very easy question for me to answer only, and my colleagues on the panel understand this, that I have a very long relationship with Lynn Stallmaster, who, along with Marion Doherty, was the first independent casting director in the motion picture business. Lynn was responsible for moving me to Los Angeles. He'd heard about my work in New York and offered me a job, and I arrived in Hollywood working for a legendary casting director who cast films like The Graduate and West Side Story and Judgment at Nuremberg and Deliverance, and it's an endless list, and a very varied one. And he's, the lessons I learned from Lynn are resounding in my head every day. He's remains a very close friend. He's at the age of 92, sharp as a tack, and really a treasure. And I was thrilled to be able to be part of bestowing upon him in my capacity at the Academy with the first Oscar ever given to a casting director for his body of work.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. That's such an amazing feat, and the perfect person to get that as the first.
It was a great moment for all of us. Obviously, tremendously rewarding for Lynn, and the least we could do for all he did. I wish Marion Doherty could have been there to join him to have a matching set of Oscars.
In all your career, tell us just about one of the most difficult roles you ever had to cast. Just, it was really tricky, or something that just really bamboozled you in terms of getting it put together.
I can jump in, and for a show that I did this past year called Mrs. America, those were similar to how Terri was speaking about her project, trying to cast people that are iconic, and also ones that are so nostalgic and important and all of that. All of those parts were challenging, but the Betty Friedan role was specifically challenging. I think it was the hardest role I've ever had to cast, because she herself was such a character, and sort of it's like it was a challenge to replicate what she was and still feel like you weren't sort of being a caricature. And so Tracy Ullman, I saw so many of the most amazing actresses of our time doing their version, trying to do it. And Tracy Ullman really, I will say, she fought for it. We saw her a few times, and she was really game, and she worked just as hard to get the part as I did to help everyone see that she was the right person. It was very rewarding for me.
She was so good, Carmen. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah.
Somebody else jump in. Who else has an answer to that?
For me, it's often these famous people, who are so emblazoned in the audience's minds. And I've done a lot of films and television shows like that. I think of Trumbo, where I had to find somebody to play John Wayne and someone to play Edward G. Robinson, such iconic people with specific looks and specific voices. Again, not to do slavish imitations, and it was a fascinating process. And for John Wayne, we ultimately hired David James Elliott, who really was known for the lead in a long-running television series. But there was something about his bearing, his swagger, and his understanding of being number one on a call sheet for so much of his television career that I think he understood John Wayne's persona in the story about Dalton Trumbo. And Michael Stuhlbarg's performance as Edward G. Robinson, likewise, not a dead ringer, but he understood the interior life of what that character was going through at a time when the House Un-American Activities Committee was in full throttle. So, challenging to get right, took a while to land, but ultimately, I think, successful.
And I think in general, I don't know if I have one character like that, one role that was difficult to cast, but I think in general, casting real people, as David said, who are just known by everyone. Everyone has an idea of their persona and what they look like. That's always a trick. I always get a little nervous before I start casting those types of people. So that's, without naming one particular role, it's just in general, that category makes me a little nervous.
I have two, I would cite two. One is in Crazy Rich Asians, finding a leading actor to play Henry Golding's part. And that was a very long search. And I feel like we covered the entire globe to find Henry. And Henry was not really an actor. So I think to find an adult with very limited acting experience who's turned out to be a dashing leading man who can actually act was an impossible feat. And I'm so happy that we found him. I'm super proud of the work he did in Crazy Rich Asians and now, in the work that he's doing following that. And then I think in terms of a casting challenge, I would reference Us, which was really hard for me, I think, to not only cast, with Lupita Nyong'o in the lead role, but to have to cast her more than once as a young girl, and then to cast her family, and her kids had to play two different roles. I think in terms of a casting challenge, that movie, that ensemble as a whole was incredibly challenging.
The differences for you between casting somebody that's known, like David talking about Meryl Streep, or you just now talking about Lupita, versus somebody that's unknown, do you have conflict with your director or your producers about that? We'll start with Carmen on that. What are the difficulties of deciding whether it's going to be somebody that's known versus somebody that's unknown?
I guess for me, actually thinking about Stranger Things, that I can answer with that in mind. Once that show became so popular, famous people, famous actors loved it and then sort of started offering their services, and you can get blinded by that. So I think that's a thing. You have to really consider the authenticity of what you built and what the show is trying to be. So if it works, like in the case of Carrie Elways, then it works and you feel it. But I think there's certainly those cases where it doesn't work and it doesn't feel natural, and you have to sort of temper your excitement at the fact that, someone really exciting wants to be in it, even though it doesn't work.
I think most casting directors will tell you that their favorite version of that is to have an audience discover the actor in that role, so that they're really sort of there's no other baggage that's being brought to that performance, so that they're literally are fully invested in that character. So I think that's generally the preference, although there are times when the collective history of an actor's performances in a lot of different roles brings an interesting dimension to a particular character. So their fame and the past images that audience have of those people are actually contribute to the creation of the character and the narrative. So, there are those specific times. I think we're always conscious that producers and studios and television networks want to have marquee value, and they do need to have viewers and ticket buyers. So we have to be understanding of it, but sometimes their desire for name value will skew the story in a wrong direction. And casting directors have to be very proactive and quite aggressive about pointing out the pitfalls of attaching famous people to supporting roles, which sometimes can take people out of the story. So I would say, using high-profile people when it benefits the narrative.
I agree.
Terri?
It could easily throw the storytelling out of balance if you miscast somebody who's too recognizable. I am fortunate enough to almost always be able to just cast the best actor, and there's very little expectation on the part of, at least with Blumhouse films, to have a recognizable face in the majority of our movies. When we do set out to find a recognizable face, sometimes can be a little bit more challenging within a low budget model. And it can draw out the process, but it's usually for the benefit of the film, because we actually need the marquee value of that, actor to help us, get the kind of distribution that we want for the piece.
I think there's something exciting. I think we all probably feel there's something always exciting about being able to cast an unknown and give somebody a shot, and hopefully, have them kind of take flight with that particular role. But it's also a little scary sometimes, because you want to cast the best actor for the role and read them in the room, and you just hope that they have a charisma on screen, that also comes along with just an acting ability, because the star you already know can hold the screen in a certain way. So there's always a little scary when you cast an unknown, because you just hope that they can do the same in their own way, and in the future become that name themselves.
Last question as we wrap up. I hope everybody has fun with this one. Now that we got David as a casting director, as president of the Motion Picture Academy, what would everybody here think about a casting Oscar category?
Who cares? No, I'm just kidding. It's
we'll see.
David, what do you think about that? Is that something that's being discussed?
I'll have to duck out of this particular question just by dint of the post that I currently hold. And the truth is that it's never been, my election as president of the Academy was not at all about my day job. It was about my involvement as a member first, governor of the Academy, and then an officer, a secretary of the Academy, and then ultimately, being elected president. So it has to do with my deep desire to empower filmmakers to recognize greatness in filmmaking, and so it's really not been my agenda. There was a wonderful coincidence in the night that I was elected president of the Academy. The British Academy, BAFTA, announced that they were, for the first time, creating a outstanding casting award for both film and television. So it was a good day for casting all the way around. And I would like to say that we all look forward to many similar good days ahead.